A shadow moves in the dark. You cannot get out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our show, Lord of the Collections. I'm your host, Valkrist, and my co-host, Tyler. And with us today are End to Darkness and the Cyber Hobbit. And also a special shout out to John Cunningham, Frodo-wise, who was supposed to be here with us for this episode, but he couldn't make it, but we'll promise to have you on one of these days soon. So today we would like to have a discussion about the two main lines that are near and dear to our hearts, both from WETA, but their earlier version that was in partnership with Sideshow. So there's kind of a distinct line there between the older line of statues and the newer ones that are currently in production and have been so for a few years. So they have pros and cons. We have our favorites and not so favorites from both sides, and so we're just gonna have a little chat about the ones we like, the ones we don't like, the whys and wherefores, and yeah. So if you are enjoying our content, be sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment or suggestions. Always appreciated, and come out and hang out with us in Ultimate Collectors Forum and the Flame of Udon for more on these discussions. So without further ado, I'll let my buddy Tyler kick it off.
The Royal Rumble, Sideshow Weta versus Weta. We got the young guns and we got the veterans over here, and so favorites from each line. So I think I'd be surprised if I'm the only one with this on their list, but from Sideshow Weta, my top piece is the Balrog, the Daddy Rog. That's, to me, 20 years later, that's still the Balrog. It's pose, detail, the flames on that mane, like that crest, are just, there's something else. I think even Prime 1's Balrog, I don't think beats it. I think the only way that thing gets topped is if Weta makes one that's like has embedded LEDs in it, and like it just, that's the best Balrog out there still 20 years later.
I don't see Weta making a new Balrog anytime soon, seeing as how they just did the classic series version, but that would be great because I want one.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I mean,
he's top on my list too.
Yeah,
by far.
I don't. He's not on my list. By the time, well, it's a pretty. There's a lot of statues. In coming up with these, it was not easy, and I kind of danced around it. But I mean, I think part of the decision not to put him on my list is because I don't own him, so I can't have a full appreciation for it. You got him, Tyler?
no, I wish
You don't, yeah. So, that
So
kind
I'm
of
the
kept
only
me
one
back,
that owns him.
right?
I
Probably.
think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have the newer one, not the classic, but I actually have the little unlimited one that they released way back, the one standing on the rock, and I have the bigger one, which I do like. The pose is a little strange, but I always like the fact that I think the statue like the Balrog should be massive and imposing, and that when they did that second one, they kind of addressed that a little bit, because also the pose of the original, he's kind of hunched down and he's sort of walking forward very menacingly in that scene where all the fellowship is running in front of him, and then that's sort of the moment they captured. But I think for me, if Weta does ever do another one, I think the perfect pose, and I talked about this with Tyler, would be in the moment where he basically just kind of puffs his chest out and he has the sword. Yeah, when he's looking at Gandalf and saying like, "Do you know who I am?"
Yeah.
And he just glows and immolates right on the spot. I mean, that would be just an amazing pose. But yeah, I think that the reason I kept him out of my list is because I don't have him. I'm a little jealous of the fact that I don't. He's really expensive to find. A lot of them have broken whips. I'm not into fixing it. And there you go.
There's another aspect of that statue that a lot of people don't talk about. It's because the tail is really long, and gravity has a tendency to droop that tail all the way down to touch the base. I used to have mine in a display cabinet in front of a window, and just the heat of the sunlight over years. You know, that's the number one cardinal sin. You never do that to a statue. They should never be, exposed to UV light. But that was one of the things that happened. But when I moved, I stored him upside down. Gravity did its thing the other way, and it's held its place ever since.
Stored it upside down. That's great.
Well, I actually, because of the tail, I had to carve out a whole bunch of styrofoam to get him to fit back in his packaging back that way, and to set him upside down. But that's what I had to do.
And if it works, why not?
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things. You're like, I'm afraid I'm not going to take a hairdryer to the Balrog. I mean, even the prices now, I don't even know what they still got to be around 2,500 to $3,000 at least. I mean, he's a hard one to find, especially in good condition.
Yeah, that's why we'll just wait for another one to come out. Like
one of the
way out of my range for a small statue.
Yeah, but most of the newer iterations, I find, like the Prime one, they've made him too thick. It's like they've all gained a lot of muscle mass, and I don't know why that is. Even the newer Weta one seems a little bit bigger in mass than the first one, and just with Valkyris was saying, in the pose where he's standing up and puffing out his chest, he seems awfully skinny and a little lengthy in that scene until he hunches over and he seems a little bit. I think it's just the view in which you get to see him.
Right. So jumping to my favorites, they're in no particular order. So I guess my first favorite from the Sideshow Weta line would be Samwise and Build-A-Pony. I think out of the 9 characters of the Fellowship that were done at that time, he's probably, not probably. Actually, there are 2 on my list, but I bring him up first because I like him the best. For one, the inclusion of Bill, it's a huge plus. It adds so much to the statue, and I think it really perfectly captures the essence of the character. I mean, it's not depicting any like earth-shattering moment of the trilogy, kind of like what Weta seems to be focused more on now. It's just this quiet moment that you can look at that statue and just kind of lose yourself in that and reflect a little bit on just the innocence of the character, his love of animals and nature, his connection to Bill, which is, obviously a lot more developed in the novels than the brief moment we get in the movies. But to me, it's such a sweet moment and statue in the way that they captured it. And I've always had a soft spot for it. Because I started collecting late, I did not get that statue, obviously, when it was first released. So hunted it down on eBay for a few years. The prices kind of went up and down. It's not one of the most expensive ones out there. It's not one of the cheapest ones either. It is limited. But yeah, when I finally did find a good deal on it, I got it, and it's been one of my prized possessions ever since. And it's made all the more special because I just a month ago I had it signed by Sean Astin at a convention. So got that extra memento there to make it even more special. So that's one of my top 5.
Nice. No complaints there.
Nope. It's a great piece.
Mm-hmm.
If we were doing a top 10, mine would go on that top 10.
What scene is that
Fair.
the Sam and Bill supposed to be from? Is there like a particular
I don't
exact?
know.
Probably
I don't
not.
think it is. Yeah.
Not exactly.
Yeah, I don't think.
It's close.
Yeah,
There's a couple close ones.
I don't recall a scene in the movie specifically where he's feeding Bill like that.
Maybe it was cut. Who knows?
Probably, or maybe you could say that it was when they're about to enter Moria and Bill's not going in, of course, and before they unload him, and he says, you know, you'll find your way back. And so he's giving him a last little bit of comfort and a snack to go. That's sort of where I place it in my mind when I look at the statue, as him saying farewell to Bill.
Yeah.
It really to this date, it's the best 1/6 Sam out there. You know, or one of the most desirable. You know, if you want a different 1/6 Sam, you either have to get him in orc armor or in a master collection. You know, so
yeah.
I agree.
So Ryan, how about you? What's number one on her? What's one of yours?
Well, so I don't really own any of the Sideshow Weta pieces except for 1/4 scale helmets. But for me, it's probably the Balrog or the Cave Troll. I think the Cave Troll has always been, in my eyes, like the Cave Troll.
Mhm.
I know that's obviously first, but I don't know. I've seen other ones, like there's the Cave Troll with like the little orcs next to him. But I the original one, just with his mace and everything, like that one looks great to me.
I agree. He's also on my list.
Mine too.
Do you have that one?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I also have the quarter scale bust. I've posted photos of them next to each other, but they are the best likenesses too. They're very, very good. I think even a little better than the newer one. I don't know. Maybe it's just the facial expression, but I think Jamie Bestwork, the guy that designed them and sculpted them for the movie, also sculpted both of them. But I think the older one still has one of the best likenesses to what you notice in the movie. I mean, it's pretty darn close. It's hard to. I think creatures are easier to capture than actual actor licenses, likenesses.
It's abstract, right? It's like we're not used to seeing a troll, so like the little blemishes, there's no uncanny valley to us. Like we see a human face, and
if you put it next to the Iron Studios one, you're going to tell a difference. So
well,
there is definitely likeness, discrepancies between companies.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a theme here on the top, pieces of. I predict they will be. It's not necessarily all human.
I don't know. I'll go with mine next. And since we've already covered the Balrog and the Cave Troll, I would pick Theoden 1/6 scale as one of the best likenesses of an actor of that line. It covers. I'm not quite sure if there's anything else that has a better likeness. There's some of the quarter scale busts are pretty good, but for 6 scale, I would say Theoden covers that.
Nice.
With the armor, and then those one of the other things too. I wanted to touch on the differences between the Sideshow Weta line and the Weta line. It's the paint applications. They used silver and gold leaf on a lot of their statues, which they don't do that anymore, and that really set their collectible line apart. I mean, I collected quarter scale busts from Gentle Giant, all sorts of other things that came out in the early 2000s, and nobody was doing things like that. It just made him look real.
Yeah, and the foil work on the paint on Theoden's armor.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, same thing with the Elendil bust, and a lot of the mini helms all have gold and silver leaf, and it just makes them look like real metal. It just wow.
Nice. I gotta agree with you there. I mean, and Theoden was a tough cut from my top 5 list. Because I kept coming up with statues and oh no, but there's this one, and Theoden was there for a little while. But I agree. Like a lot of folks, sometimes, there's a bit of a disparagement sometimes. The older statues, this and that, all the likenesses were terrible, and that's always my go-to argument to say no, not always, man. Like, and I do agree because I'm a big stickler for likeness. To me, that's always an important aspect because we're not depicting an abstract Aragorn or an abstract Gandalf as imagined out of the book. It's like these are supposed to be representations of the characters we saw. So I want to see Vigo's likeness. I want to see Ian McKellen's likeness and all that. So in this case with Bernard Hill, I think it's like, wow. And considering how the let's say, less technological the processes were back then in capturing the actor's likeness in a medium like that. I think they did a fantastic job with Theoden, and he's easily the closest, if not bang on, likeness of the actual character in that line is that one. And I know Tyler will forever cry that statue is not on a horse, but if they could take that sculpt and just put the helmet on it and then stick it on a horse, I think you'd be happy.
That would work. It's coming
He's
this
even
year.
shouting in that one too.
Yeah.
So
It's coming this year, so I don't have to wait too much longer.
there you go.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Can you hear my dog snoring?
No.
Nope.
Okay, great. It's being really loud. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
But now we know he is.
Yeah.
So I have so I also had the cave troll on my list, but my third one was the Ringwraith on Steed. I think that is just a classic. You can't be in some ways I prefer it to the new one. It's a little less dynamic. It's just like, it just looks like it's straight out of the book or the movie, just that Ringwraith asking for Baggins Shire, just it's hard to beat that one. It still holds up really well.
I agree.
Yeah.
He's also on my list.
Same. He made the list. Again, that's another one that took me a long time to chase down and add him in. Managed to actually get a pretty decent deal on him, and I kind of went through a bit of a moment there because unfortunately that's one of the ones that ended up on the counterfeit market. So there are some cautions out there to folks if they see this statue for a really good deal that maybe seems too good to be true, to do your due diligence, because this statue was popular and it was one of those that was counterfeited quite a bit. And apparently one of the best ways to tell is to check the rubber feet in the base. That's what I heard from my source, Idril.
Yeah.
That because she knows folks at WETA, and that she was told that this is one of the easiest ways to tell that statue. And there are a couple inconsistencies on the paint.
Yeah.
Apparently the mud spatter on the horse and the lower robes of the rider is way more pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On
counterfeit.
On the counterfeit, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some out there, and they have a much brighter mud, and the horse coat is almost brighter. And yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So buyer beware. And I also don't think that, unlike some other cases that I've heard about, I don't think the counterfeit Ringwraiths had the original packaging. Like at least the color art box is not there. I'm not too sure. Anyways, I'm 100% sure I got a genuine one. And also another thing that tends to happen is the harness.
Yeah.
Yeah. That leather over the years. I mean, what's that statue now? At least a good 20 years old. It does dry up and it becomes very brittle, and the rings are so thin that it doesn't take much. So mine did come with a little tiny bit that I had to glue on, but it's not noticeable now. But it's an amazing piece. I love it. Yeah.
There's one aspect to that, and I think Kit brought it up. It's the leg length.
Yes.
That is shorter than it should be, and it's one of those things that now I have a hard time not seeing it. But
unless you hadn't mentioned that, he's absolutely right. And yeah, you're like me. I cannot now unsee the comment that he made. If anyone that was wondering what we're talking about, is that when a rider sits on a horse, if they're sitting, properly, and they're not a short person, and we know that the Nazgul were not short, is that your foot on the stirrup will hang below the belly of the horse. And on that statue, I mean, I suppose you could make the argument that maybe his knees are a little higher than they should be for some reason. I don't know, like when the rider suddenly stands up in the saddle.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, his feet are a little higher up than they should be. So
yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. I almost forgotten about that.
Hey, this is pro and con, right?
Yeah.
I know.
The stable boys at Minas Morgul just didn't do the saddle right.
Yeah, well, he's
Yeah,
on my
it
list
didn't
too,
measure
so
his,
he's still top 5.
Yeah,
the leg length, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Highly recommend that one, Ryan.
If
Yeah.
the only
I
thing
was always a
better is
big-
if you had a little button that said Shire Baggins that kind of came out screaming, but
Yeah, yeah.
I was always a big fan of the sideshow the Gandalf the White on Shadowfax, where he's kind of like
Mhm.
a Gyarados or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of like statues that capture like a dynamic moment, like when it's just you can clearly see the action going on. That one always to me was a really cool looking. I've got 6 different Gandalf things now, plus I've got the 1/4 Prime 1 Gandalf coming, but if I was to get another one, it would probably be that one.
it's another great
Fair.
piece.
Good one.
Mhm.
Let's see. My next favorite one would be Sauron, the
Mm.
Sideshow Weta Sauron.
Mm.
For me, when I unboxed that piece and put it together on the base, and I took a step back and looked at it, I think to me that was the moment when I kind of thought that this looks kick-ass. And despite I didn't actually have a lot of other statues yet at that point, because I'd only then begun to sort of retroactively hunt down a lot of the Sideshow Weta pieces that I liked. But I did get Sauron when he was released. But for me, that was the moment of realization, like, I am now seriously into this hobby, because just the scale of the piece compared to the other ones, and the sort of the majesty of the pose and the moment in the movies that it captured, and just how well done it was, and the detail. And because it's like, I guess if you compare that to one of the other ones, that's kind of like a quarter scale by comparison to the 1 scale, if you know what I'm saying, like size wise statue to. I'm not going to sit here and measure out exactly whether that's the case, but of course we know that Sauron is a 6 scale, but that would be the size of a quarter scale piece versus one. Anyways,
Right.
I think you guys get what I'm saying, but it was, yeah, that was the moment when I thought, okay, I'm really in this. I'm in trouble, because I was hooked. I felt like I was kind of just playing around with getting some of the statues before, and it was kind of cool. And the moment I got Sauron, I'm like, okay, this is it. This is
Right.
I'm really into
that was
collecting these, because this looks awesome and I want more.
one of the few
Ultimate
pieces
bad
that
guy.
The ultimate bad guy, yeah.
that was one of the few pieces that during the time of release, they actually teased some of the behind the scenes and the sculpting of that piece coming together. They
Mhm.
really didn't do that with the line that much when it first started coming out. The other thing too, I don't know if you guys ever saw promotional material. They had little posters that would come with some of the helmets, and they released that all of those in series. So
Mm.
they would release like 5 or 6 statues all at once. Same
Right.
thing with busts and mini helms and stuff. They would come all out in series 1, series 2, series 3, and then for the different movies. But and Sideshow is the one that did most of all that promotional material for that.
Mhm.
But it was, anticipation when Sauron came out. It was just like, this is the mother of all pieces. You're going to want this, and look what's coming.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. David Tremont was telling me, I believe he was the primary sculptor on that one. And he said it was less like a sculpture and more like a model, because he said every piece of armor was not sculpted, but beaten out of lead and formed. And then, so yeah, every piece of armor on there was made out of lead.
Wow.
Just like the original screen used Grand in a way. So very
Have you
cool.
ever been to David's artist station page?
I
Yes.
have looked at it. Very cool.
So there's a couple of unreleased Sideshow Weta crowns that he worked on. Galadriel's crown, and he did the same thing. You can see the little work that he'd done on it, but they're actually made out of metal and hammered all. But they're also like glued to a black polystone base, because it would be too fragile to cast otherwise. But
Yeah.
that's how it was created as well.
Very cool. So what are we on to next? Or who are we on to next?
Maybe me for my last one.
Yeah.
So far, I've got everything else: the Balrog, the Ringwraith, the Cave Troll, and I said Theoden before. And now for my last one, I'm changing from 6 scale to quarter scale, and my favorite one out of that line is the Twilight Witch King bust.
It's a very good
It
one.
it has such a, I don't know, a unique look. The tilt of his face, the crown. When I originally first saw that piece, it just like completely mesmerized and pulls you right back into that scene. It has such, I don't know, because it's in the movie, it's obscured by the ethereal look of the ring, you know, being on, to actually get a good clear view of his face and the crown and everything. It's my favorite from the line.
It is a great, but one of the harder to find ones, but it's one of the better ones.
It's pretty fragile too, so I can see why it's
Yeah.
harder to find, but it is popular.
Yeah, easily the
So
most
is the statue.
expensive bust in my collection.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, that's an
but he goes in
interesting-
my top 5.
It's a good one. Fair enough.
Andrew, is there any piece that you wish you owned that you don't? From that?
Of the line, there's a couple, but the Stone Trolls is one that I really wish I would have gotten. And even just recently, I've been thinking about the Watcher in the Water. I never really cared for it when it first came out because all the tentacles are all separate. You can see the seam line between them all, and it has such a high gloss from the being wet and in the water. It just kind of looked a little obscure. Never had a lot of desire for it, but now I've really gravitated towards all the Fellowship pieces, and those are 2 that I would like to have to kind of finish out the Fellowship.
It would pair so well too with the new Doors of Durin.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
No, I'll segue into that by saying that the Watcher is on my top 5 list. Yeah, so it's one of those. I think it's a statue that doesn't really get enough love and attention. I mean, the appearance is so brief; a lot of people just tend to forget. But it was such, for me, in reading the novels way back when, and even today, it was such a memorable moment. That really kind of captures the imagination, and I just love sometimes like mysterious things like that have no like explanation in a way. Like even Tolkien
Origin.
himself is very vague about, you know, the things that crept into darkness in the underdeeps and made their way up to the surface. You know, that sort of even reading as far back as the Silmarillion, the things that, you know, that they're creations of Morgoth at some point, but never. Most people in Middle Earth would just go on blissfully live their entire lives not knowing that these horrors lurked just beneath the surface. And so I kind of love that Cthulian almost aspect of this creature, and like knowing that there's this menace just under the water. And so that was such a cool scene for me. I loved the way it was done in the movie. And when I became aware of the statue, I thought that's one I gotta have. And again, I hunted it down, got a really, really good deal on it. You're absolutely right, Andrew, about the seams, because well, you know, even in the Weta statues today, let's face it, they have not perfected how invisible they can make these seams. There are some newer statues out there where those are still very glaring, and others where it's barely perceptible. So for the one tentacle, especially that's at the front, yeah, it's very visible, but I can let that go because the statue in and of itself, it's really quite incredible. And that sheen that bothered you is because it is supposed to be there, and once you accept that, yeah, it looks very different from all the other statues next to it, but the way that they've recreated the wet look of it is, it's just amazing. And if there was any one way they could improve that statue, and I think it would be very difficult, would just be the actual water effect on the base. Because with the way that the stuff that they use now, it just looks awesome. But I mean, that's, to me, that's an oldie but goodie. I love that statue. I would never give it up. So
if we're going to
It's one of
add
my
to that,
top 5.
and the pro and con thing about is all the older statues never utilized magnets in anything. that I really
Right.
wish something like that had magnets on the pieces. Same thing
Yeah.
with Sauron and his head. How many people helmets have broken
I've
off?
lost the helmet. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was not magnetically attached. You know,
I
every
forget who it
company
is,
has.
I saw a guy who basically he had like I don't know 6 of them laid out that he had made and was offering out people who had a broken head.
Yeah,
Um,
Dr.
Yes.
Malcolm.
Dr. Malcolm.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, must
A
be really
solution,
complicated.
a solution
I-
to a problem in the industry.
Well, I learned that lesson a long time ago. I used some of the museum putty to hold my helmet on a long time ago.
Yeah. Interesting story about the helmet on Sauron too. Supposedly from Weta, it came with a square key so that it couldn't move the way it does. The factory in China apparently changed it to make the production easier. And
Mm.
you know, they didn't care that it resulted in, but
Well, they made 10,000 of them.
Yeah. So but it came with a key from Weta to China. So, you know. So how about
That
you,
would be
Ryan?
really.
Oh, no, sorry about that.
Another favorite, you mean?
Yeah. What did we get through yours?
Yeah, I think we've gone through a couple of them, but I was always a big fan of the Fell Beast and the Morgul Lord.
Oh yeah.
Just because I mean I even I've gone in 3D, made a 3D printed version of like I mean my own, but it's nowhere near it's sort of like the Iron Studios Fell Beast that's like up on the rocky thing. But I to me that you know when I think of the Lord of the Rings, like images that go through my head are Sauron and like the evil kind of Fell Beast and stuff like that, and that's one of the epitome pieces to me. I mean, granted, it's one of those abstract things too, where like, you know, I mean, there are some close-up shots of the Fell Beast, but like, it doesn't have to be perfect to that because again, it's one of those uncanny valley things where we recognize humans, but maybe not monsters being perfectly. So even if it's not perfect to me, it still is good enough for me. Again, one of my very first ever 3D printed projects that I actually spent some time on was making a Fell Beast diorama because I wanted something very similar to that. So to me, that's up there.
Right.
It's hard to find nowadays too. Like it's
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
rarely ever seen it when people are showing off there. Do you have that, Andrew?
This is one of the few pieces I've sold. And the reason why is because the scale is so different than everything else from the line. And it didn't really
have to, right?
yeah. And that was the one thing. It just kind of really stood out against every other piece. It was like you would really want that probably twice to 3 times the size, kind of like what Iron Studios did, just because the Morgul Lord was a little tiny speck on there, and just kind of his helmet, you know, was so small. But it is a great pose. Don't get me wrong. It was a really nice piece. The sheen of the skin of the Fell Beast, you know, the way that faded in and everything. It's a neat piece, and it's one of those things I would kind of hope that Weta revisits someday and makes something else bigger.
I would
I've
love
actually
to
seen it. Somebody,
Yeah.
sorry, as I say, somebody paired it off with the more recent Gandalf on Guahir, the more recent Weta mini, and they appear to actually be the exact same scale. So, well, if you do have those two pieces, it actually looks pretty neat. Little because when I get what you're saying, Andrew. Like the piece is small, especially in comparison to most of the other things that we will have in our collection. But when you have another piece that you can put beside it like that, that can, you know,
that helps.
Is a comparative scale and actually creates a bit of a scene. I think that would make it a little more. I guess.
No, I've sold it pre mini Weta line.
Of course, yeah.
I would love to see them do something similar to the new Smaug, but with the Fell Beast. I think that would be really cool.
Kind of like the over the dead marshes where the Fell Beast has got his wings completely open.
Yeah. Or in Osgiliath somewhere, you know, just they could do something similar with the new Smaug. Just give us a Fell Beast.
Yeah.
You know. I
Big
think that'd be
wings
pretty
out.
cool. Yeah.
Or even with his talons out, grabbing a horse.
Yeah, that or some poor Gondorian or
Yeah, that would be amazing.
that would be really cool. I think it
It'd
would
be
really well for
huge,
Weta.
but it'd be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The last one on my list is a bit of a curveball, but it is the Escape Off the Road plaque. You know, I think that's just a really cool piece. I think it's got the best likeness of the four hobbits out there. And
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool that it was sculpted by Alan Lee's daughter. You know, I think that's a cool.
I don't think I've ever seen that one before.
It's very cool.
It's on my page.
Here, let me go grab it.
But yes, I would totally agree. And I think she sculpted a couple of the other plaques as well. She doesn't have a whole lot of pieces accredited to her.
So many things to get. I've never gotten into the plaques.
yeah.
There's 4 of them, and I own 3. I actually had the 4th, the Flight of the Ford, and it's just there's not as much detail as there is in all the other ones because it's the relief difference
cool.
between Gandalf on Gwaihir versus Orthanc and stuff is really hard to see in the back in comparison to the other 3.
Right.
But yeah, that was one of my more favorite. I just think the detail, like there's great texture on the Nazgul's cloak. You know, the likeness to Elijah is
The depth.
really, yeah, it's just really well done on it. You know, it's just a great piece. You know,
I
hard
agree.
to find now too.
Isn't that another really high edition number?
I think so. Let me check here.
6,000 maybe?
10,000. 10,000.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, wow.
that shouldn't be that hard to find.
This is
I wonder if they
64.
actually made that thing.
Yeah, who knows? I mean,
It actually your green screen totally blurred it out.
It was there a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it a bit.
Yeah, it was-
when you step back or went forward, it disappeared. But
Yeah, it was a tricky one.
my last piece is on the list. It's probably not one of the top 5 in anyone's list per se, but I put it there because it holds that honor of it being my first statue. It's like, you never forget your first, ha ha ha. But that's the one that basically I talked about how Sauron was the moment where I realized, okay, I'm in this for the long haul. But the very first one that I got, and it was easy to get because it was not a limited edition, but it basically began the entire thing with I was already into collecting United Cutlery, so I already had my foot in the door with Middle Earth Collectibles in that regard. But all my swords on the wall were very lonely until I started getting the actual depictions of the characters that would wield them in the movies. And my first statue ever was Gandalf, a very basic Sideshow Weta Gandalf. For the longest time, I didn't even notice this until it was actually John Furtowise, who I mentioned at the top of the show, that I think he said in one of the threads on Flame of Udun that, or maybe I'm mistaken if it was him or not, because he talks a lot about the older pieces, but it might have actually been you, Andrew, that yes, that there is an error with the staff.
Yeah, it's
and
a
again,
combo.
once Steve did that out, now I can't look at that statue without thinking about that. But it's such a special statue for me because it was the first that I just happily ignore that. I do have 2 or 3 other Gandalfs, so no worries there. But the statue is a weird, I don't know if you want to call it a continuity error. Continuity error would be him just holding the wrong staff for the moment that the statue actually depicts. Yeah. So it's a weird combination of the pipe and the crystal staff, which doesn't actually exist. So
well,
there it is.
Mine's not a great example because I have modified mine. I put an actual crystal on mine.
Yeah. I was just going to say that.
One is just a painted yellow stone.
Yeah, it looked like a stick of butter.
Yeah.
But you can see the pipe there on the side. It's It's
And
so
then was it
strange.
you that said or asked one of the guys at Weta what was up with that or whatever, and they either didn't
Uh,
realize it, or it was one of those days where they just kind of freewheeled things a little
yeah,
bit,
I
and
don't,
Maybe
I
it was
don't
too
know.
late.
Somebody at the props thing, they just stuck the pipe in there, and nobody thought twice about it.
probably found a way to jam the pipe into the crystal stuff, and that's
Thought
what
it
we
was-
ended up with. But
Yeah, didn't realize. it
anyway,
was
I
wrong
think
one.
it's, that aside, and setting aside the fact that it was my first statue, I still think it's a pretty cool piece. It's
Hmm.
I
pretty
wish I
basic.
knew
It's a
what he
basic
was pointing at.
pose. Yeah. Isn't it?
I mean, is it the
It
door
must
to
have been in
Moria?
Moria at some point. Yeah,
Yeah.
when he's pointing the way or at something, or look at, I don't know. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but anyway, that's my last of the top 5.
It's fair. So should we move into our least favorite piece out of each?
Let's get mean.
Let's get mean. Wow.
Start with you, Tyler.
Start with me. Okay, well, I had a hard time picking. But
Surely
it-
there's some that you kind of go,
well,
I would never own
it
that.
was a toss between the newborn Uruk
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just think it's weird. It's just
Yeah.
this weird, slimy, it's just odd, and the Legolas just, sorry, Daniel. I know Daniel sculpted that, but I just find the likeness not great on it. And it's one I've passed up on a few times when I could have had it for really cheap. And I've just
Every
Is
time
that
I've
why
ever
you
seen
haven't
it,
bought mine? It's been for sale for a while, Tyler. Come on. Can you use it for parts on anything?
Nope. Maybe the base. I don't know.
Actually, I have a soft spot. Again,
it
that was my second statue.
Oh, yeah.
Right after Gandalf, I got Legolas, and you're right. The likeness is probably one of the worst ones. He looks like a wax sculpture. It's just,
It makes me wonder
yeah.
if the paint job might,
It might.
be enhanced,
Yeah.
if that would help.
Oh, yeah, because there was those photos of the one that I forget whom that really they altered their Strider.
Yeah.
Have you seen those? Yeah, the
Mhm.
Yes, I
original
have.
Sideshow Weta Strider, which is another one that's kind of got a bit of a poor likeness to it.
Likeness. Yeah.
And I don't know how the process to me is just magical. You see the before and after pictures. Have you seen this thing, Ryan? It looks amazing. It goes from looking like who is this statue supposed to be of? Obviously by the gear and the pose, it's
It's
Strider.
stunt double.
Right.
Yeah, but they altered it in a way, the painting, and I think there was even some minor sculpting done to it,
I think
that
some
it
of the
looks
hair.
just like Viggo Mortensen, and it's just amazing. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they
with-
lengthened the cape, the cloak.
yeah,
with
Yeah,
a,
it's
with a
beautiful.
couple of those sideshow pieces, there are pretty good sculpts under that paint. It's just the paint
Yeah.
isn't always the best and hides that likeness.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of Sideshow Weta pieces that when I look at the face, I'm just like, just. I mean, there are definitely exceptions like Theoden, but I like Grima Wormtongue or Legolas. Galadriel, she's also kind of if that came out nowadays, like people
No one would buy it.
be like, what? It's just in comparison over time, the quality has improved on everything, so you have to meet that standard if you're gonna sell something, and yeah, it just
Actually, it is. Yeah, it's a long list.
And getting them,
Well, if you were a completist at the time, you did buy it. I mean, I do have a lot of these that we're talking about.
Mhm.
But the one thing that just is discussed a lot is the Sideshow Weta line is mostly sculpted by everybody from Weta that worked on the movie. So there's a pedigree that goes with it, whether the likeness is there or not. This was made by the same people that made the movies.
Mhm.
So
I guess if you want to have maybe a caveat to that, though, is that they didn't have to sculpt any faces, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, But I hear what you're saying though. It does give a lot of value just knowing that the people who made the movie and
Yeah.
are responsible for that work.
Yeah.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
I mean, they still use that tagline today, but it doesn't still hold true as much to me, knowing that there's so many other people that are making a Lord of the Rings piece that may have only started since The Hobbit was there. I mean, technically, yes, they're still working for Weta, but they weren't there and designed something for the movies, and that to
Yeah.
me still holds a lot of weight.
Yeah. It's more the company now rather than the artists themselves. So
Correct.
too true. Yeah. So for me, the first of two pieces that I'm really not impressed with. Don't own either. Big shocker. The first one for me is should be come as a surprise to no one, but it's Pippin in the Citadel, Guard of the Citadel gear or whatever you call it. To me, there's a lot of things wrong with it. It's an awkward pose. I know the moment in the movie they're depicting. It's the way that he's just kind of hunched and off to the side, one shoulder up. The expression is, to me, he just looks like some weird old lady in the. It almost reminds me of that. What's that one painting? I think it's a Van Gogh where the person's going like that and the frozen scream or whatever. So
It's not that
I mean,
bad.
they caught. I mean, I love Pippin in the movies. I love Pippin in the books, and they sculpted him in a moment of fear and terror. As the sculpture of the face is not that great. I don't like the pose, but to me, the cardinal sin of that piece is that it forever marked the moment where you cannot have a complete fellowship thematically in the old Sideshow Weta line because they took that one character and put him in something other than the gear that they wear in the Fellowship of the Ring. Like, this is from the Return of the King. I know that there was a concept for Pippin in his blue Fellowship attire. We've seen the prototype for that and never made it to production for various reasons. It has its own flaws, I guess, but be that as it may, I wish they had come out with that, because then we could have all 9 characters on a shelf, even if they're the older Sideshow line and some of their likenesses aren't that great. At least we could have a complete fellowship that way in 1/6. So to me, like, I collected all 8 other characters and I stopped myself from buying that Pippin because there's just so many things about it that I dislike. And also it was almost like a screw you to Weta. Like, why did you give us this? Maybe at some point they were still going to go back, because as I hear things that the line kind of, when the partnership with Sideshow kind of dissolved, it wasn't something exactly that, probably didn't happen out of the blue, but I'm not sure if they were expecting, in the sense that there was so much that was left unfinished from their end, and that they weren't necessarily prioritizing some characters because they thought this was going to go on for a long time. So that when it did, I mean, what was the interval there, Andrew? About a year or two before they struck out on their own as Weta to do the statues?
Oh no, it was
longer than that?
3 or 4 years before
really?
Weta
Okay.
started their own. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But they've never gone back. Like, we've since gotten the Pippin that I've always wanted, but he's on Treebeard's shoulder. And yes, I have him, but I'm still forever pining for that set of just 8 fellow. I can't get the number right. 9 fellowship. See, the number's been forever incorrect, and now it's stuck in my mind. All 9 fellowship members, just on their own base, thematically as the Fellowship of the Ring, not in Rohan gear or Gondor gear or Aragorn with Helm's Deep armor, nothing like that. Just as they are in Fellowship of the Ring. And,
I think that probably the only people that bought it, like me, were a completist, and I did it just for that reason.
Completely
just
understand.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't say no
that's
to
my
an
first
Aragorn
one.
at Helm's Deep.
What?
I said I wouldn't say no to an Aragorn at Helm's Deep.
No,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't either, as long as
Twen-
he's done well.
Yeah, 20
There's
years.
plenty of
Yeah,
him,
so-
and there's only
I've got a
one bad
160
Pippin.
figure of that, but it's not
Yeah.
the greatest. It's
yeah.
okay.
So Andrew, what is your least favorite from the Sideshow line?
See, I didn't have just, I did pick 5, and you already said the newborn Uruk-hai. He's pretty high on that list. And we did talk about Aragorn as well. 2 other ones that would probably hit my list. There's a whole pile of orcs that are just generic that I really don't care for. Weird poses. They don't quite fit to me. But
Yeah.
I'll pick 2 of the other ones. Shelob, just because of the sheer, once again, it's the size thing. It's a
Mm.
different scale than everything else.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
it's-
I'd never have a spider in my collection.
That's
it
exactly
just-
why I could never own it. Exactly the same reason. I can't. Yeah, I
No.
understand it's fake, but the whole just it creeps me out, and I
Yeah.
don't want it.
And he's one of the, or she is one of the end pieces of the line, and you probably can still find it on eBay for a decent price. They made a whole bunch of them, I think like 7,500, and it just no. And I really hope they don't make an MC Sam
Same.
against Shelob.
Just
I
had
don't
this
wanna see that.
conversation with somebody. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would refuse to get it for that same reason. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
can't do it.
Even if it was only half of her, just
Especially if it looks
sticking in.
really good, like a really detailed spider. That makes it worse. for me.
Yeah, yeah.
You have
No,
some
and-
arachnophobes in the house. I see.
Yeah, no, most
Very
definitely.
few people like spiders. That's just one of those
Yeah.
universally hated creatures, unfortunately for them. But
You
Nope.
guys know
Yeah.
Haunts of the Collector? He used to own hundreds of tarantulas.
Oh,
Yeah,
no thanks.
like, before he
Nope.
got into statues, he was a big spider guy, and yeah,
Huh.
I mean, I commend anyone who can do that, because that's most people see a spider and they kill it immediately. Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I just pick any one of these and I stick it with it.
put it in the microwave or something.
Yeah,
Just-
yeah. But with that caveat, the other one that I would go with is King of the Dead, and it's mostly because of, I don't know, the depiction. I was looking at him again today, and he's skinny. I know he's supposed to be emaciated. He's supposed to be part skeleton, but it's the face and some of the weird pose. He doesn't quite fit within his baseline. His sword sticks out a little further. It's not. I would hope that they would have gone creepier with that look. It's something more of a skull-like face, maybe a slightly different pose, but it's more of a disappointing character. I own it, but he's one of my least favorites. He was on my list to almost sell.
The miniature King of the Dead from Weta, I think, is a much better depiction of that character.
But
I was gonna
isn't
say,
he
I
in
wish
clear
they'd done
resin?
that one in once.
Yeah, like a
Six,
green clear resin.
Yeah, and that's what he
But
should
even
be.
just the pose in general is much
Much better.
Mhm.
better. Yeah. About you, Ryan, you have a clear piece. You don't.
For me, the Haradrim soldier that's like been stabbed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was my
That-
number
To
2.
me, every time I ever see it, I'm just like, how would you
Why?
make that? Like,
What were they thinking?
Why?
there's also another a bust of like an orc that has like a arrow in his
Oh, yeah.
eye.
Yeah.
What is
And there's
it?
another one where his
He's got
head,
his
his
throat
neck is
cut.
cut.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
if I want to get a statue to remember something, I don't want to remember it dying. Like,
I agree.
I mean, I understand that it's part of the scene, it's part of what happened, and etc. But it's not for me.
I don't know. Well,
And that
if
one-
they would have made Boromir dying with
That's
Aragorn on
different.
top, would you
That's
buy
different.
that?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
different.
he's not dead yet. Like,
That's different.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that is different.
He's seconds away.
although I guess the other statue he's standing up, so maybe he's not dead yet either. But
Yeah.
There's
but it's also
artfully
because it's just a
depicted
random
death
soldier,
scene.
right? It's not a specific character. Like, it's just a guy.
I think it's emotional. What the emotion sticks
Yes.
to you more
Yeah.
than the depiction. So Boromir's death is very emotional versus a random Haradrim soldier or an orc. Most of those people you do want to see die.
Yeah. Like the bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for
Some
me,
of
a lot of
yeah.
I was to say though, like again, part of my dislike for the Haradrim one is sort of kind of centered around the same thing as the Pippin, because I just see it as it's just a wasted opportunity. Because Pippin, Fellowship character, we know at some point we're going to see him again, and but the Haradrim soldier, like some of those cultures of Middle Earth, they've had so little attention devoted to them. Yeah, we got a ton of orcs and stuff like that, but the Haradrim and the Easterlings in particular, and we know their moments in the movie are brief, all things considered, but we have one single Easterling statue and one single Haradrim statue. I think the Easterling statue I don't own, but one day I plan to track it down. I think it's quite cool. And if I'm not in a completist in the sense that Andrew was speaking to, that everything being released, you got to get it kind of thing. But I've always had this fantasy of just having one of each of the things in Middle Earth there present in my collection. So to have an Easterling and a Haradrim would be cool. It's a couple of the major factions in the War of the Ring, and they had such an interesting, unique design in the movie when you consider all the work that went into bringing those things to screen and making them unique. And I felt it's just wasted to have this guy hunched over with a sword stuck through him. It doesn't really evoke any kind of wonder and awe at the
culture,
creativity that
I have
went
all the
into
other ones. I would get it for the completionist reason, but other than that, just...
like I want a Haradrim in my collection. That's the only one that's been done in over 20 years. I don't think any other company has even tackled that particular culture of Middle Earth, and that's we have that one guy that on that did the Elephant Rider.
that bust was really well done.
Yeah, the bust is amazing. It is very expensive, but it's certainly not for me. But like maybe like a 1/6 of that character somehow, or but so again, that's one of the things that bothers me about that Haradrim soldier. It's just weird that he's just standing there with a sword through his chest, but that it's like, wow, we had one shot at a Haradrim and this is what you give us? Boo.
You could get the Mamakill, but it's also dying.
They had something with Harad and dying, and or if you want a Corsair, you get Peter Jackson. So I don't know, just weird choices they made. I guess they thought they had a lot more time to go back and revisit some of these cultures and moments, and then they never did, and now they're just focusing on the things that sell. And I think it'd be a hard case for them for someone at WETA to sit down at a board meeting and say, what's our next statue going to be? Someone puts their hand up and goes, hey, why don't we revisit the Haradrim? And everybody's like,
sit down.
Don't think that's a good, that's going to sell very highly.
It is.
Another Gandalf.
Another Gollum, another Gandalf.
Yeah.
Another Thranduil, or better yet, 15 mini epics.
Yeah.
20.
Okay, so moving on to the happier hunting grounds here. WETA, the new WETA line. What are your guys' top 5 from the new WETA line? I found this quite difficult because
you want us to each go through our top 5?
Yeah, just for time wise, let's go through. So Andrew, do your top 5, and then we'll just go in a counter or a clockwise circle.
These aren't in any particular order, but I'll give you my top 5, and I'm sure they'll carry through. But Bilbo at Bag End, just from the sheer amount of detail put in that piece, it has everything I love about Bag End, and it tells such a story. I mean, there's more detail there than you probably need, but that's one of the reasons I love it. But Treebeard is absolutely a marvel if you see it in person. Isildur, one of the first pieces to actually have the translucent skin on a statue, and the pose is absolutely beautiful. The new Elendil that goes with it, I've never seen anything quite as detailed. You can tell it's digitally sculpted from the amount of stuff, the amount of layers that are put into it, and the work. And the new Sauron, those were my top 5. I'm sure there's a lot of other honorable mentions, but those were mine for 6 scale. and that they even beat some of the newer MCs in my opinion.
Mm.
So
That's pretty good. I have a very similar list. I had Isildur. I had he was the first of the new line of Weta statues that I got. I just thought he was incredible looking, just the armor, the likeness. He's still one of the best ones out there in my opinion. He just looks great. Elendil, he's like the likeness, all the details on it, I won't. You basically said everything there is to say about him. Sauron, the new Sauron I have on that list too. I just think it's just an incredible beast. Even with the pauldrons or whatnot, I still think he's just a great
pauldron gate.
Yeah, he's just a great. There's so much detail. The paint application on it's great. And
Fabio is going to be the guy to beat.
And it just pairs nicely with the new Elendil. So as you can tell, I like the prologue.
Yeah.
And then I have the MC Golem. I just think that's the best Golem out there. I just think that it's the best and one of the best. And I don't know if you could argue him or Treebeard, but it's just a cool statue. It's in a big enough scale for Gollum that it has some really good presence. The eyes, the detail, everything about it's just an incredible statue. And I don't even really like Gollum all that much. Kind of a little annoying. But the statue is a great statue. And then I had a tough time picking the last one. Just, like you could throw in so many other ones here, but I did pick the Rohan Royal Guard. I just think there's a lot of cool detail in that armor and how they brought that into a statue. It's just a really cool piece. So that was
I agree.
For me, father and son, of course, have been mentioned twice. Elendil and Isildur, two amazing pieces. The detail and funnily enough, just kind of a callback to the Sideshow Weta. When I was thinking of my favorites, I also, despite the likeness not being the greatest, I really like the King Elisar piece. Not just for the very classic calm pose.
Yeah.
It's the very definition of a classic series statue, what they are known as today, but also because of the coronation armor. I just love that look. And so that with Elendil and Isildur really reminded me of that piece and just that look. But so beyond that, Bilbo and Bagend, of course, and Treebeard, and my last spot, it kind of tossed around that quite a bit, but I really, really, really like the Mouth of Sauron on Steed. I think the detail is amazing. Yes, it's a hateful, nasty looking character. Every time when my friends first see that statue, I said, like, bend down just a little bit and look at it. Like, look under the helmet, and the detail on the mouth, like for something that small of a scale, it just looks so gruesome.
He's the one piece that I have from the new line that has a little bit of an artistic style to it. It takes a little bit from the realism. I don't know if it's the pose or just some of it. It just feels a little bit like they took a drawing of it and brought it to life more so than a screen capture. I mean, I have it and it is beautiful, just like you said, but it just has a little bit, I don't know what it is, but it has a little bit of a stylistic approach to it to me that, and I don't like, I'm not sure what it is.
Bad thing?
No, it's not a bad thing. It just, to me, when they're set next to something else that I can tell the dynamic pose, like next to another rider piece, he looks a little more stylistic, more so than realistic. But like I said, all the details are there. It's a highly detailed piece. And I don't know why. I just can't put my finger on it. But it just has that
because you'll break it.
Yeah.
It's very spiky, that one.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. How about you, Ryan? Top 5.
So we've already said a few of the ones that are Elendil is, to me, the best statue that Weta's done in a long time. Bilbo at back end. I was also a really big fan of the Rivendell environment.
Hmm.
I mean, as far as like environments go, like that one to me like is like one of the coolest places in Middle Earth. Like, and I don't know, I don't own it, but would love to if I could ever find it for a good deal. But yeah, to me that one always stood out as like if I wanted to own some really good, um, you know, environment, one of the older pieces, it would probably be that one. Also, a really big fan of Minas Morgul, but for the Hobbit side, I would probably go with my recent statue, the Smaug the Fire Drake. That you think of the Hobbit, like, it's an adventure to go see a dragon, right? So
Yeah.
That is an impressive piece.
it to me is really 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 well done. I mean, there are obviously some little minor things that I didn't like about it, but it's still like the presence of that piece, like it's amazing.
Mhm.
Absolutely love
I
it.
wish that had been the first release of Smaug. Like I have the
Yeah.
original one, Smaug the Terrible, and I love it, and it is impressive. But as far as depicting the dragon in his full glory, sort of in attack mode, and I think they really got it with that one. And yeah, it does need a lot of space, and it's that just the way it's posed off the statue and it's all balanced on that tail. It makes me super nervous, especially as we were talking earlier about gravity and time.
Yeah, luckily
But
they did
hopefully
a
they've
really good
learned a
job
few things
though.
in 20 years.
Right. Yeah, they
Very
did a really
good.
good job though, using like metal on metal to hold it up. And I have good faith in it. But yeah, to me,
well,
it's like a nostalgic thing. Like my first introduction to Middle Earth and Tolkien was The Hobbit. So
Yeah, same.
to me, growing up and knowing about like this big dragon, and like to me, that's any depiction of me has always been compared to probably like kind of like Smaug or something. So it's kind of one of those lifelong pieces that I'm very glad to own now.
Since we're on the topic of dragons and Smaug and how he was your first introduction to Middle Earth, just a small aside here, guys, but indulge me. And I'll ask this question for everyone. 4 legs and 2 wings, or 2 legs and 2
Well,
wings?
there's a difference. There's technically dragons are the ones that have, I guess, 4 legs and 2 wings. But then
Wyverns.
the wyvern, the
Yeah.
Burns,
W
yeah,
word, those are
traditionally
the ones
have.
that
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to everyone else who doesn't really care, they're all dragons, right? So
Because actually, I think it you see it in the original prologue for An Unexpected Journey. The design of Smaug had 4 legs and 2 wings.
right.
So when he breaks into Erebor, and
Hmm.
there's that shot of his legs walking through and just blowing fire and devastating the dwarven army that's there to meet him. That was then later altered to the new design where he only has 2 legs and
You know
his
why,
4
though?
limbs are. Pardon me?
You know why they had originally 4 legs? It's to match the design of the drawing on Thror's map. So if you look at the
Well,
little red dragon,
It's
that
pretty.
was to
yeah,
match.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes
And
a
that
lot of sense.
matches J.R. Tolkien's depiction of Smaug or
It's
Smaug.
traditionally the
Smaug.
depiction of medieval dragons in Europe at the times. They had the four
Yeah.
legs, and they have 6 limbs, which if you speak to anyone who's into biology, zoology, whichever, like they say that's not how it works. Animals
Yeah.
don't have multiple limbs like that.
Besides
But
those
anyways.
horrible spiders.
Yeah.
have more than that.
Yeah.
You can remove 2 legs and they're still fine. They still get around
Yeah.
just fine.
Yeah.
Abomination.
So, but the iteration of Smaug to have 2 legs and 2 arms or 2 wings matches the Dragon Slayer, the epic fantasy movie that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's why they went that route. I know Del Toro originally designed him that way as well. He's a big fan of that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways,
But
sorry for the sidebar. Totally remembered.
So
you
we-
could devote a whole episode to Smaug.
Yeah.
So we on to least favorites now?
Yeah.
Yeah, the two least favorites from the Weta line. For me, Yanzig I just think,
Sneg.
yeah,
Yes, Ned.
Yes.
Yes, Neg.
yes, whatever his name is, I just, yeah.
I got him, but never opened it up. Like
Oh, yeah.
for a really good deal, and it's just been in a box. Like, maybe one day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Insult. You buy it and you don't like it, you just leave it in the box.
Yeah. And then probably now when I say like I still like them all, right? Like they're still, but and I'm not saying they're bad, but probably the other one I would go with would be the Boromir. Just that's not how I want the character represented in my collection. You know, I understand it's like his heroic, you know, his redemption and death, and he's fighting heroically, but it's just they could have done that other ways.
His face.
Yeah,
His face would look
This
a little
too doesn't
different.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's on my list of 5, but yeah. No.
yeah,
He deserved better.
yeah. And I mean, I hope we'll get a different Boromir, classic series of Boromir in the future. You know, I'm
Yeah.
hoping for the horn, him blowing his horn, is what I'm hoping.
Mhm.
That would be great.
Mhm.
They need to nail the likeness though.
They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have
Get
to.
Fabio to do it.
For me, the least two, yeah, this was a lot harder than the old line, and pretty sure my 2 picks are going to be fairly controversial. I know there's a lot of love for these 2 statues out there, so I think
You like to be controversial.
Oh, really?
Really? No, on purpose?
No, I just like to express my opinion, and then people don't like my opinion, and suddenly I'm being negative and this and that. Well,
Yeah,
no,
but
I'm
when
just
everybody
have to carefully
All right.
paraphrase to say that this is just my personal opinion. So I'm not casting aspersions on the folks that enjoy these statues. Like, that's great. I'm sure they have things that I like that other folks don't, and we're all entitled to that. It's just the 2 that I've picked, I know for a fact that they're very highly popular statues, and people love them. But there were things about them for me personally, and I'll stress that personally, that I disliked enough that not only did I not buy them, but I actively, you know, when they come up in threads, I say, no, I don't like that statue, and this is why. And
Well, let's hear it.
yeah, if I built up enough suspense.
Yeah.
First one is Dark Galadriel.
That's one of mine.
Okay.
It's on the one hand, I give points to Weta for, you know, bringing okay, it's great, and yet another Galadriel, but no, hang on, this is a special Galadriel. They could have picked Dark Galadriel from the Hobbit, for example. They didn't. They got the one from, you know, the books that we all in movies that we sort of prefer a lot more, and it is a memorable scene. It did make an impression on me in the books. It's kind of like they sort of interpreted a little more drastically than I would have, in a sense, in the movies. But what bothers me about the statue is the face. I'll be blunt. The way that she looks like she's pretty much half asleep in the statue. It doesn't go with the scene. It doesn't go with everything else about the statue. The statue is so dynamic. You look at it and you see movement. You see all of those tendrils and hairs and their robes and everything just flowing in that moment in the movie, and the light emanating from her and the fury and the voice. And then you look at the face the expression that they chose for the statue, and it's like she looks like she's falling asleep watching television. It's just so calm and sedate. And I've called attention to this, and most folks will disagree, but I don't know how much love there would have been for a bug-eyed Galadriel going all crazy in the moment, but I think that what they went with is so counter to everything else about the statue that it completely made me not want it or like it or anything. So feel free to disagree, but that's my thought on it. I think they really screwed up with the expression, and to me that ruined the entire piece. So have at it. What do you guys think?
No, I don't
agree with
disagree.
Completely.
I was impartial to it when I never bought it because there wasn't enough interest for me in it, and it wasn't necessarily just because of that one reason. There's a whole bunch of others. It's like it was expensive for what it was. Took up a lot of space, and I didn't need another. If I wanted another Galadriel, that wasn't the one I would have wanted. So
I think that's the issue, right? It's like people want to think of Galadriel, they want to get like her, pureness or whatever.
yeah,
I feel like you would only ever get that one if you already had another Galadriel that you really liked, and you're just wanting to also have
Yeah.
that version. But yeah, it's not
Mhm.
not what I think of
The
when I
Ho-
think of Galadriel. Even though it was
the-
a really cool scene, like, but it's just
yeah,
I think,
the Hobbit Galadriel was a lot better.
I think
Sure.
you're a heretic, Val.
what's
Well,
the other one?
No, I'm kidding. I'm
Start
pretty
lighting the
indifferent.
fire then, because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
what's number two?
I'm pretty indifferent to it. I don't really.
number 2, people are just starting to unbox it as we speak and post pictures, but it's the Dead Marshes
Ah,
Yeah.
Master Collection. I just don't like the piece. What can I say? It's
That
I
coming
agree.
very soon.
and I've spoken my thoughts on this, that I think from an artistic perspective, like the boldness and daring of the piece and what
Yeah.
they've done with it is it's extraordinary. Like, it's not that I am lacking in appreciation for what they did, and I always pick on the likenesses of Frodo and Sam, and I think they got them pretty good in this one.
They could be better,
But
at least in my opinion.
that's just not how I envision that scene being brought to statue form. In fact, one of the most recent posts that I just made a few hours ago was because somebody, I think it was Platt, they put the picture of the print that comes with the piece,
yeah.
and it's just Frodo, Sam, and Gollum on the surface walking towards the pool. Anytime anyone ever spoke of this scene eventually being brought into polystone form, that was always how I envisioned it. And that's the problem sometimes, is you start to cement how something should look in your mind,
Mhm.
that when anything else other than that comes out, it's bound to be a disappointment. But sometimes you can work your way around to loving something, and I try as I could, I just cannot find love for this piece. I don't like the verticalness of it. I don't like the ant terrarium. Look at the different levels of, terrain. You got the underwater, you got the surface, you got the tree up high. Something about it just doesn't feel like a piece that would fit traditionally in my collection and thematically along with the other statues. I think Weta's gotten wrapped up very much lately in depicting scenes and moments rather than the characters themselves, and that's not how I really want my collection. Yeah, there's quite a few of the statues that we've talked about. We can pick the particular moment in the movie what they're from, but they're done in such a way that it doesn't override the statue for me when I look at it. And this one it's all about that moment. It's not about Frodo or Sam or Gollum. It's about the moment in the movie where he falls in the water and the specters come up and Gollum rescues him. And in that sense, it's beautifully done, but that's not what I want. It's not what I like. And especially for the price, I'm glad to give that one a pass. So
And it's kind of interesting how that scene, when you think about it in your head, you think about the wide, vast, flat like swamp, and then it is very tall. I mean, like I've ordered it. It's supposed to arrive here Tuesday, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I get a lot what you're saying. It's definitely about the moment instead of the characters. But to me, it was one of those that I like what you also said, the boldness of it. Like I don't think there's never gonna be any other statue that's gonna look as, maybe the word is interesting to look at. There's I guess three, or is it two of the actual like
Spectres.
underwater guys, and then you have
Yeah.
Frodo, Golem, and Sam. So there's a lot of characters to it. There's a lot of angles to look at it. So to me, that was kind of the big appeal. But I understand your opinion.
It would look very cool on like a Lazy Susan.
Yes.
It's like
but-
what Valkyrie said, though. They went with, is this something we could do versus something should we do? Right. They went the could we do direction instead of should we do. And like I said, you applaud the artistic direction that they went. And It
Mhm.
just it is vastly different than anything else they've ever done.
And like you said too on the forum there, Andrew, the art print, I think I would have preferred that had they brought that
Yeah.
to statue. And I think that's what a lot of people
Oh, if
were
I was
saying.
you picture that in your head, yes, like you said, vastly. And I was trying to even think about that when you look at that art print, it has such depth in the background where you know there's just a vast wasteland that even depicting that in a long form statue of just a couple of, tufts of grass and part of the marsh, it
Mhm.
still probably would not convey enough that
Mhm.
you would know that this is the dead marshes. You know where it's from, but it doesn't convey that scene. It's kind of also, I mean, it dovetails into Kyle's new version of the Grey Havens. You need something big enough to be able to capture the depth of the entire scene there, and that's hard to take a little pie, a little slice out of that, and let you know where this is ultimately coming from.
Mm.
I think that's why we like
So,
individual statues, right? They're a lot easier to display in a collection. They're a lot easier to depict a scene than trying to add more of it.
That's fair. So what would your two least
Oh.
favorites be, Andrew?
Legolas from The Hobbit. Old Man Legolas is probably one of my highest on that list of instantaneously. Like no, the dynamic poses. There's a lot of those from The Hobbit that I really don't.
Dance Club Legolas.
Yeah, that I didn't care for. And Elrond was another one. Both of those match really well.
Mm.
There's a few of the new classic lines too. I put on there the new Balrog and the Aragorn. The Balrog is too small.
Such a weird pose.
It is a very weird pose. And the only reason Aragorn goes on that list is because of the facial likeness. If they were going to redo him, I don't mind his pose. It's just they really need to nail the likenesses for these new pieces for as much as they're asking for, and that's what I really want before I'm going to upgrade to something else.
Mhm.
Like, to me, he doesn't. The Sideshow maquette that I have is still good enough that it doesn't get beat yet. So something out there needs to beat that for me to upgrade or buy another one. And I really hope they do that with some of the new Hobbit pieces for some of the classic pieces. I just really like Gandalf the White right there on that line. It's close. And there's just some, and maybe it's the paint again, and maybe I need to see a few more of them in purses. But I mean, it's mostly there. But is it enough for me to upgrade from my Sideshow Weta one? Not quite. It's that's where I'm at least in my collection. Something's got to be pretty good to warrant having to sell off another one and pay for something more.
Because that's where we're at. Because the more and more that Weta now repeats characters, because there's not a lot that they have left to go to. Denethor, as I was saying, like they really have to step up their game in terms of if you're gonna redo a character, as they're doing quite a bit. If it has nothing new to offer, if it's not as good as at least as good as the previous one or better, then what's the point? I find it strange. Like you don't have the Aragorn and Amon-Hen, Andrew.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Don't. It's probably the best one I think out of all the Aragorns out there, excluding
I would say for likeness, yes.
the face. Yeah, the pose it takes something to get used to. A lot of people aren't fans, but it found it strange, like given the closeness and release times of the statues, that they couldn't just go back to that and capture that and put that on the new one. But I guess enough time passes and the artists change and the methods or whatever that suddenly you get an Aragorn that looks completely different. So you can look at those and say, like, is that the same person? Is that supposed to be the same person?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I feel that they're really gearing a lot of their newer pieces to a different collector set. I mean, there's a lot more new collectors entering the market now that they're definitely. I don't know. Maybe it's people that are asking for this stuff on Facebook, and I think that they take more of those recommendations than they do anywhere else. That's where the
Mhm.
social media is really driven.
I don't
Because
really
they
think
don't,
they have an issue with selling out. It's like pretty much all their. I mean, I guess it's an open edition classic series. That's a different story. But they, Elendil sold out immediately.
well, he wasn't sold out. It was a timed edition. So it should tell
Well,
you, Leaf
I
Lock
guess
should tell you
that's still
something.
true, but
Right.
I guess like they're going to continue. I think like that piece is going to continue to rise in value because of the limited edition, and that's like we all have agreed that piece is like the one of the best they've done. So that will always be a like sought out after piece if you don't already own it. So.
Yeah. It should have been higher. It could have doubled that edition number, I think. Easy. I don't know what they could have done to gotten more
Extend
people
the window
behind that.
Maybe.
A month? I mean, it was 2 weeks. I just
month,
don't know if maybe they don't do enough, advertisement on their stuff. They're assuming that previous collectors are going to want it. I mean, I don't know what their email distribution base is. If they're sending those out to 10,000 people, everybody that's ever bought something and signed up for their newsletter, and they're hoping that, those people are seeing it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the price. I mean, he was also one of the most expensive single character 1/6 scale pieces. I mean, 550, I think was one. That's pretty high for a single character. Besides Sauron,
They did make another mistake, is that they did their website upgrade right in the middle of the pre-order window for that statue, and as we know, that turned into a disaster. So that had to hamstring a lot of their sales. That was just silly. Sorry to say.
I really wish they would
Weta.
change it to showing way more of what's coming in the future. Like there are a lot of other, what is it? Infinity Studios. I think they've
Dark Side.
Even Dark Side. They, given even it's a little silhouette of a character, like it's coming, right? Like with Weta, who knows? Maybe tomorrow they'll have a brand new int that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Well, we've touched on that and several episodes. In fact, now that's always a little bone of contention with us with Weta, is that they're not fans of giving us a lot of preview or advance notice of their pieces. There's no planning. Now with so many other players in the game, it's like, yeah, okay, so Darkseid is releasing a Gilgalad. I've long wanted that piece. At least we know Weta's releasing one because it's supposed to go with the Sauron and the Elendil, but in many other respects, it's like, yeah, so those of us who've been waiting for a Denethor forever, like I want to, if you're loyal to the company and you want to stick with some consistency in your collection, like with the bases and the scale and whatever, you're going to hold out. And sure, nobody else has done a Denethor, but if Prime 1 or Darkseid or whatever came out with an excellent like 1/6 version, like why wouldn't I buy them? It would finally fill that hole in the collection. But that could be avoided if I knew that Weta was making a serious decision or declaring their intention to actually release that character. But
well, doesn't
all
Weta
we ever
own
get
the
are a
1/6
hint or two or
license?
just silence, so we can't.
Yeah,
Doesn't
nobody else.
Weta own the 1/6 license? Nobody else can produce 1/6 scale?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, you're right there. So, correction to my statement, but is that in perpetuity, or is that going to end one day? Like at some point, someone's going to step in.
There's a feeling, and it's just a feeling lately since we've heard like hardly anything from Weta, from the amount of changes going on with Daniel leaving, other artists leaving, not knowing who's taking over. It almost feels like we're almost on the end, right? They're just going to shift to minis that are open and mini epics, and 1/6 scale would be dying just because of sheer cost to the company to continue to do so. It feels like we might get the Return of the King stuff that Daniel talked about, and after that, it feels like we could be drying up. I just have a feeling. I don't know why, but it just feels that way.
How, there are so many companies getting into the 1/4 scale.
Yeah,
like that. Like there's going to be a new one announced. Some new company. Like what was it? J&D. They just released their Arwen, and like, where did that come from?
Well, and
I know their releases have been amazing so far. So they want want to
Yes.
probably have that kind of like angle to be able to do a Lord of the Rings piece. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows what? It's weird how that Weta is the only one. I guess if you have the license for it, that makes sense. But does the sole licensing thing not exist for 1/4 scale or 1/3 scale?
See, and I'm wondering, is the collectible company going to Warner Brothers and asking for a license, or is Warner Brothers shopping it actively, trying to make more money? Going to every collectible company, going, "Hey, would you like to get this license? It's very popular. Would you like to get this?" And moving on to the next one, and that's why we have a surplus of people making stuff right now. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
We
good
don't
question.
know. We don't
I
know any
know.
of this stuff.
And the other thing too is seems a lot of a fair number of collectors now are moving from 1/6 to quarter scale. They prefer that scale. And you know, it's you read some of them are moving in that direction. They just, you know, for whatever reason, they prefer the presence of quarter scale statues to 1/6 scale. But I mean, the Weta line still seems quite healthy. You know, they're still selling lots of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just they're getting dang expensive.
Yeah.
It's hard to justify the
and-
price because you're getting quarter scale pieces for less than in
Yeah.
many cases. Like for me, I prefer the 1/6 just because of, you know,
Space.
display constraints.
Yeah.
Like if I were to take my entire 1/6 collection and upgraded it to 1/4, I would probably only be able to display half of it. So for a lot of us, it's just not realistic. Yeah, I get the impressiveness of the scale.
Mhm.
You know, the
Yeah,
whole
but is
size
the
does
fidelity
matter
there?
joke kind of thing. Bigger is better. Well, sure, and you get to
Price
see
is
more
bigger.
detail, especially if the company is really doing a bang up job.
You know, the
But
Dead Marshes, the 1/6 Dead Marshes, like with shipping included, that was insane, $400 again.
Mhm.
But it ended up
that's
being,
the other thing. Yeah.
$3,000, which you can get 2 1/4 scale Prime 1 pieces for that. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So
It's insane.
Not only does like you know, display you know, space, that's not only a reason why I like the 1/6 scale, but the other one is it has that connection to the pre-production of the movies, because a lot of their concept maquettes were made in 1/6 scale.
They did
And
quarter scale maquette troll busts.
yeah.
That's about the only ones that I know that were actually released.
Hmm.
But
And
yeah,
and so I like that connection, the 1/6 connection that Lord of the Rings has with that scale is, and I think, you know, that's why Weta went with 1/6 to begin with. Which kind of brings us to our next. What are the pros and cons of each line? Do you guys think, you know, the Weta line, the Sideshow Weta line? You know, we kind of touched on it earlier about likeness. I think that is a pro in favor of the newer Weta line is most of their pieces have a pretty good likeness. Not all of them, but most of them have a
Well, I think
great.
that's really as a result of, you know, the modern era,
Mhm.
and having to have that quality to be able to compete against other companies, and also just because, like with Elendil, they did it digitally. They
Mhm.
can go in there with a computer and zoom in all the way to be able to fix the wrinkle just perfect, as opposed to, you know, having to looking through a magnifying glass and then just hopefully you can barely move your arm. Plus, you know, you don't have an undo button, right? If
Yeah.
you make a mistake, you have to like redo that section again, and it just makes it more cumbersome to do. Digitally just has too many pros to it to not continue doing it that way.
Yeah. A con I would think of the newer Weta line would be the price
yeah,
compared
cost.
the cost.
Well, it is a price issue of like if you're buying it like you know, some of the older Sideshow Weta pieces are still crazy expensive.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why, like for instance, like, you know, I have the 1/6 scale Aragorn is like it's $400 it'd be hard to find another 1/6 scale Aragorn that's $400.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah.
there's both sides
Yeah.
of the price issue.
Oh yeah, like there are some pieces in, or another good example in the new Weta is the classic series Ringwraith. If you wanted a Ringwraith in 1/6 like that, the other one was your other option was the old Sideshow maquette Ringwraith, which is quite expensive
Very
and
expensive.
hard to find. You know, so like
Yeah.
but when I meant more price wise, I meant when you compare that to what Sideshow statues originally sold for, you know, and you
125
compare,
bucks.
yeah, and you compare it now to their cheap
400.
entry level is 400. You know, and I understand inflation and cost of materials and everything else has all risen, but the average income has not kept pace with that, right? And so they're
It
considerably
is not
more,
proportionate.
yeah, they're considerably more expensive now than what they were in the Sideshow days.
Well, you could take in comparison. UC has continued to re-release their entire line of old stuff, and it has stayed fairly competitive and comparable. They've done everything they can to keep their price that way. This is slightly different. Like, once again, you're paying for a name. I mean, what has been around for 20 years? They've done how many more movies after Lord of the Rings that you are also paying for that name, I think, as well. And who knows what other things that they're trying to finance that goes along with the increased price. Or everybody else talks about, do they actually know what aftermarket price of their collectibles go for and want a piece of that pie? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that price could go up.
Yeah.
But yeah,
yeah. One of the pros I was thinking of the Sideshow line, and this is more for entry newer collectors, is, you know, we talked about the Mouth of Sauron earlier. It's a really cool piece by Weta. It's a really well done piece, but it kind of came out in that odd timeline for Weta where they didn't have big edition numbers, and it was between after the
I think only
Hobbit.
750.
Yeah, you know, like it was kind of I'll say a more quiet period for, they weren't coming out with tons of statues a year.
And expensive. I think
Yeah.
it's $6.99 too.
You know, so as a newer collector, I haven't been able to track one down for a reasonable price, but I can get the Sideshow Weta Mouth of Sauron bust for a pretty reasonable price and have that character depicted in my collection for a reasonable price compared to the 1/6 statue, which I think that is a pro of some of the Sideshow line, is being able to pick up some of those characters fairly affordable and have those in your collection where you couldn't in the Weta line.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I've yet to ever get into getting any of the busts. I tend to have this completionist thing where
Yeah, you don't want to have it for the bus line. There's a lot of them, and some of them are god awful. So you don't want to complete that line. I think I do. The only ones I don't have are the troll maquettes. I had them and I sold them because they weren't like officially part of that line. The boxes were even different. It was weird. But I do have all of them. That's probably the only completest line I have. Everything else I've picked and choose.
I have the Hobbit holes. Hey,
Yeah.
something. Other than that,
well,
I
you're
a lot of
gonna,
them in boxes.
you gotta make room because there'll be another 20 more.
Well, that's what I was just about to say, is that it looks like they're gonna continue to just every now. I think this is because they know they sell. Is my theory.
They also sell them at the actual attraction.
Right.
There's a souvenir shop, so why would you not?
Yeah. Well, they're small and easily transportable and whatnot, but I mean the prices on those are starting to get a little scary too. Like for something that's not really, it's still fairly recent in collecting history. And for how little anything has changed about them. I mean, it's basically a little Hobbit facade. Like you don't even get the complete. In many cases, as has been showcased on the forum, like Min's been really good at showing the actual photo of the whole as it looks in current day Hobbiton to like, well, this window got cut out, that door, this fence, that tree, this and that. So we're not even really getting the complete Hobbit hole. And it's supposed to be an affordable line that kind of like the classic series, like was started with the best of intentions. That's already gone up $50. And the Hobbit holes, I think, have just gone through their second price increase.
Yeah.
They always kind of had two categories. There was just the little one and then the one with the slightly wider base. But now the little guys are at the cost of the bigger ones, and the bigger ones are starting to get like
the only time
they're basically
to
the same size as a mini or
like on Black Friday or something. Get 3 of them for
yeah.
like $50
That's
or
the
something.
only way now that they're affordable is to wait for the sales. Especially for like now with the shipping, doing a 180 on a lot of folks. I mean, it's kind of always like that for Tyler and I, but for you guys down in the States, it's gotten pretty
Yeah, I
scary
really
now.
don't understand what has recently happened with their shipping. Like, you know, I Ellendale, I think, was like maybe $50, and it was a pretty decently sized box. I don't really know if the Masters Collection Dead Marshes is so much more bigger than that. I mean, maybe there's like some rule, like when it gets to a certain size and weight, it has to increase and whatever. But
That's what somebody
$400,
posted online. They
and
showed it. There's a surcharge. There's a $200 surcharge over a certain size.
I
crazy.
think shipping companies are taking advantage of a lot of external factors, and they're just turning the screws on companies that depend on rely on them, and they don't actually have a lot of alternatives out there, so they get to dictate terms. And I suspect that WETA's back is kind of like up against the wall in some ways. Because well, who are they going to turn to? FedEx, DHL, they're all cut from the same cloth. So unless you're willing to take the risks with like United States Postal Service, you run the risk of I mean, it's less secure. It generally takes longer. They're a little less careful and diligent in keeping track of where things are. So they have a higher rate of loss with packages. They don't offer as good insurance options. And
yeah, but
they also have, because they tend to be unionized, you know,
yeah, they did just have a sale.
Corporations, there's a limit to what, well, there's a limit to what their carriers will lift in terms of weight and size. That's why there was that distinction in the past between whether WETA would use UPS or USPS, especially shipping things to Canada. And it was based on the dimensions of the box. And they would flat out say, like, you know, your Canada Post workers will not lift or carry a box beyond this certain size or weight. It's just not part of their union rules that they should be, you know, lugging these things from the van to your door. And
you know,
understandable in some cases, like Treebeard, I get it. We're 2 massive boxes, but it does. What I'm trying to say is that it limits the options that the company has in terms of how to get these things to you. But it's also not fair that then the company, the shipper, the courier has the ability to blackmail you essentially. Like, well, unless you want to start doing this yourself, we get to charge you whatever we want. And that's
still the shipper's choice. You know, I just bought a welder and it came in a huge box. It weighed 60 pounds, cost me $550, and they shipped it for free. So I'm sure the profit margin's probably way different, but they still have a choice on what they want to do. I mean, like WETA just offered their sale. They shipped everything for free. It does
make me wonder if there's a classification of the item being shipped that's playing a factor here, because
a collectible.
Collectibles are luxury items. They're not necessary. They're not must-haves. Like welding equipment, that could be your livelihood. Somebody depends on that to make a living and sustain, you know, support a family and a mortgage. They probably have a chart somewhere where they decide that these items are exempt. These so-called church surcharges that they're putting on everything.
It's quite possible.
Like, you know, a $2,000 polystone statue. If somebody can afford this, they can afford the extra $200 that we're going to slap on this, because too bad, it's a hobby. It's not a necessity. So I think that's something that we tend to forget sometimes.
We say the word affordable.
I don't think
all the time. What is affordable anymore?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah, but
So,
we
Like
talk
the-
about this all the time. Completists. I feel sorry for anybody
Yeah.
that needs to or has a compulsion to want to complete a line and buy everything that comes out. That's an expensive addiction. It's not just I need to have it. Where are you going to store it? Where are you going to put it? Do you get to look at it? I mean, there's a lot of that. I mean, we can debate on what a statue, means to you and how you like it, but there's so many other aspects to collecting that it's a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah.
100%.
So what are some of the other kind of pros to the Sideshow line that you guys can think of? The big one for me is like it was mentioned earlier that they were sculpted and worked on by people who worked on the films. They have that romantic aspect to them, which I appreciate.
I would say scope. If you wanted something different from the weapon plaques to the helmets to the quarter scale busts to the statues to the environments, they covered almost everything on that line and got you started on it, that you could still find some aspect from those movies if you wanted to collect. They covered a lot, so that's the biggest pro to me.
Yeah, they have a lot of cool different things that if you're not into statues, well, you got the weapon plaques. If you don't want, or the busts or the mini helmets, they're
the metal mini helmets.
It's always been a big thing. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to get some of the Sideshow Weta helmets. I mean, I have some of the recent Hobbit ones and stuff, but holding the weight of that makes it so much more valuable to me, because it feels like it's just the same thing, just shrunk, as opposed to the same thing shrunk but then maybe the different material.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's always again, and I'm always a fan of the old sayings and whatnot, but it's the whole, they don't make them like they used to. Like, Andrew, can you think of any Sideshow Weta statue where you suspect that the thing might be hollow just based on its weight? Because I think that's become sort of a more common thing now with some of the newer statues. They don't quite have the weight that they should, and we know why that is. Whereas I think the old ones were
so no, the old
solid.
Ones, I had one broken Ringwraith steed bust, and it was hollow. So I think they're all rotocast where they can. So it depends on the thickness of the statue. So, where it became hollow was near the base, and the base on the larger busts are bigger. So those are rotocast. So it's thick in one part and thinner on the other. So I think most of them are probably solid just because of, figures are long and lengthy. There's not very many.
That's what I'm getting at, is what is so many of the newer statues like more prevalent now? They feel lighter somehow, or is that just they change materials, or are they using less?
Yeah, and I've always never heard of the mix ratio and how polystone is made. So if they use more stone in some of the older ones, then they might use more poly in the newer ones. That might be part of it. That I'm not sure.
Interesting. Yeah.
Is there a difference? I've heard the term, and I think maybe you even commented on one of my videos talking about this once, Andrew, is the difference between like poly resin and polystone.
Yeah, polystone is a mixture of like a two-part urethane, which is part A, the resin and a hardener, and then the polystone is an additive, and they basically like cold cast porcelain. So it's a mixed up stone of some sort, gives it rigidity, gives it weight, and it's more of a fine art additive. And poly resin is a lot like fiberglass. It's still a two-part. It's a gel with a hardener that's put in it. Most all the UC stuff is made out of poly resin. It can be more brittle if you don't add some sort of fiber reinforcement to it. Usually, like all the stabs that are made have a metal pole or something in there to add rigidity to it. But I'm not actually sure what other companies besides Sideshow and Weta have used besides Polystone. If everybody else uses the same thing, I've heard there's only a handful of factories in China that make everything. I would imagine they use the same stuff on everything. So, but those are the two discerning factors when people talk about polyresin and polystone. They even smell a little different. Everybody has the polystone attic when you open up a fresh box, and polyresin is a little different.
Yeah. So are the new mini helms polyresin or polystone?
As far as I know, they're polystone. Unless, there's some, softer, flexible stuff, and that's more of a plastic. And I'm not even sure what that might be. It might even be a rubber or a vinyl. It's cast the same way, but it's made out of a different material so it doesn't break. You would think those helmets would be done that, but I've not seen a broken one. I've not had a broken one of the newer ones. I've not had it, so I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure they're polystone. But that is a good question. I mean, we brought that up not too long ago about how durable a metal helmet was versus the newer ones. But you can break anything if you try hard enough.
Just break in different ways. Yeah.
Yep.
I have one that fortunately took a tumble.
Yeah,
that's not good.
Blame the cat.
Many years ago, I had my stuff all out on open display shelves, and I threw a pillow at my now wife, and it missed her and knocked down to like 4 or 5 pieces. And my Frodo still has some of the hair broken off of it, and my Golem, it was like an exclusive Golem bust. Part of his ear is broken. I think everybody that owns a collection for a long enough time has little stories somewhere of something happened, cleaning something, and it got stuck and broke. I mean, it's just a natural thing. I mean, moving my Treebeard, his arm fell off and broke off 2 of the tips of his fingers. It was just the scariest. I still lose sleep over it. Yeah, I mean, they were clean breaks. You can't even tell where they are.
$1,000 fingers right there.
Yeah. Now, yeah. Yep.
One day I'll decide to not buy a car and I'll get Treebeard.
Or I could put my name underneath it, so when I die and someday you can inherit it. I don't have any children, so
yeah. I still think what it would be well off to make in the mini line Treebeard and some hands. I think
I would love that.
Sell pretty well.
For the longest time, I've been looking at this really great 3D printing model I've seen of Treebeard that I've seen many people even do it, and it looks great. It looks very, very similar to the Weta one. Yeah. And ever since I got my resin printer, I'm like, man, do I want to undertake that? It takes so long to make, but
I've seen a lot of those. It's like a low poly version.
Yeah, it's not nearly as detailed, but I mean, if you look at it from a distance, you're like, oh, is that the Weta one? Like, yeah.
Well, it's like somebody took it and they scanned it. They 3D scanned it with their phone, made a low poly.
They made it, they scanned it and then maybe went in and like fixed some things here and there that didn't scan correctly, but it's almost identical.
Watch, Weta will release a new 1/6 scale Treebeard and a bigger light up prancing pony and just ruin Valkyrie's retirement fund.
And you would just love that, wouldn't you, Tyler?
Well, I think we've talked for quite a while now, and we've had a fun discussion. So I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion on Sideshow Weta and Weta. And if you're wanting to learn more about this, check out the Flame of Udun, the Ultimate Collectors Forum, and if you're on Facebook, the USA Lord of the Rings collecting community, and swing by, say hello. We're all on there, so don't be afraid to say hi. And thank you for joining us.
Bye, thanks for having me.